Hello, hello, and welcome. I'm going to be making a video giving a full flip through of my reading journal that I made last year. This was a little project that I made just for myself. I wasn't going to share it, but ultimately I'm really proud of it now. And so I've been really inspired by the YouTube videos that I've watched in making some of the spreads that I'll show you. And obviously I love books, and I want to talk about the books that I read last year. So to start off, you'll see I used a Leuchtturm, or however you say it. This is the 120 GSM paper, so I didn't get bleed through. You can see just how thick she got. I've got my new one for this year, and I've already started to add to it, but you can see the difference. Much thicker. And unfortunately I didn't use all my pages. I debated whether or not to even get a new journal. I thought maybe I would just keep going here, but ultimately I wanted a fresh start for the new year. So you can see I've carried it around a lot. It's a little worse for wear. But I got some little stickers. They're having some trouble. So the way that I made my journal is very much in a collage style, as you'll see. So it was important to me when I made this journal that I wasn't just going out and buying a bunch of stuff to make it. A lot of the videos I would see, or like inspiration online, was really focused on buying a lot of stickers, buying a lot of accessories, and like if you want to do that, go for it. But I have a huge amount of collage supplies, and I just thought, what a great chance to actually use some of the things that I have. So I'll show you. This is a book that I found in a little free library, and it's you can tell I live in Montreal, which is why it's in French. And it's a shopping guide to New York City, and it was published somewhat recently. I don't fully understand why a book like this would exist when the internet exists, but anyway, it's full of incredible pictures, and I've really cannibalized it, as you can see. Everything that's cut out is in my reading journal now, but there's just so much good stuff in here. So this was really perfect. I got to just carry this one book around with me, and it was really a challenge. I did a page for every book I read, and so it was really a challenge to try to find some image in here which would in some way represent the books that I read. So whether that's it kind of looks like the cover, or it somehow represents the themes of the book. Yeah, it was really fun. And I could definitely see myself coming back to using this book. But this year in my Lavender Notebook, I'm using a different book, different vibes. So this, I think, is not the best collage. This is when I was first setting everything up. But you know, my style improves as we go. Oh, and I should also say, if you can hear / I hope you'll hear the lovely fire in the background. I'm out at my cabin, aka an old falling down hunting camp that is, you know, sinking into the ground, but that's what we could afford. So it is just super cozy here, and I tried to set up this video to be cozy for you too. I really love just watching an extremely long, cozy video, knitting, or just having it on in the background. So I hope this can be that for you. I've got my tea. It's hibiscus and dandelion, because I have a feeling that the tea drinking community heavily crosses over with the reading community. Okay, delish. So, title page. Okay, so this I wanted to be kind of, well, as you can see, a key. And I like to break down my reading journal into seasons. So this actually comes from when I used to bullet journal. So a lot of stuff you'll see might feel pretty bullet journal-y in here. And I like to just have different colors for different seasons. When I first started book journaling, which was the year before this one, so this is 2024. So in 2023, I just like bought, I think it was from the dollar store or something, like a pre-made book journal, and I really enjoyed tracking my reading. I'm a writer myself. I teach literature, and I did a English and creative writing undergraduate and master's degree. And since I've been out of school, I kind of missed having the opportunity to reflect on the things I would read. I would just read something and go on to the next thing and maybe talk to someone about it, but probably not. And so I really enjoy doing the writing the book journal, so that I actually have time to reflect on the books that I've read and set goals for myself, which you'll see. So anyway, some of the materials I'm using to make the journal, I really thought I was going to use my Kaweco, which I absolutely love, but I ended up not using it in this because I wanted to keep it a little more simple. So almost everything you'll see is the black Sharpie fine liner. I know I'm going to get questions. These are all Tombow dual tip pens. I keep everything here in my trusty little pencil case, and I thought I would actually make a separate video if people are interested, showing my pencil case and what's in it and all of the supplies that I use to make the bullet journal, because it's just going to be too long of a video. This is already going to be really long, so that can be its own video, giving you a little pencil case tour and all of the supplies that I used in detail to make this. So I've got the different colors for the different seasons, and then also matching washi tapes. And I'm sure you're wondering why I start my year in December. That's just because I started my original book journal in December, and I just kind of went with it. I think it also kind of matches the seasons in my mind a little better. So December, January, February is winter, March, April, May is spring, June, July, August is summer, September, October, November is autumn. That just makes sense to me personally, and so that's why I do it that way. So here's the table of contents. As you can see, there was just some amazing background images in that Shopping in New York book that I got to use here. So the way that I organized this, you'll see all kinds of different colors. So this lavender just indicates pages that are not books. So they are like, goals, reading reflections, etc. And in between, I do these things that are just quick reads, like maybe I read an article or something and I wanted to reflect on it, but just an article doesn't need a whole page to itself, so I just jot it down quickly. So every other one of these is a book that I read, and if it is highlighted in the seasonal color, so here you can see it's winter, and then this line here shows we start spring, etc., then that was one of my favorite books of the year. So I like to do that just because it's super easy to see which were my favorite books of the year when I flip through. And these numbers are not how many books I've read, that's actually just the page number, because the Leuchtturm is paginated. So that's really helpful in finding things. So I thought I might need an extra page. Whoops. Okay. So it's weird that this is at the beginning, but these are actually the reading reflections for 2023. As you can see, I read 107 books. So this is from my previous bullet journal, which I'm not showing, or sorry, my previous book journal, which I'm not showing you because it just is not nearly as interesting. So for format of books, oh, here, the things that I track, I should say. I track the format of the book, so whether it's physical or an audiobook are the two main ways that I read. Then the genre of the book, so fiction, nonfiction, poetry, graphic novel, mixed genre, children's literature. The rating of the book, and then the source, so where I got it from. Did I already own it? Did I buy it this year? Did I borrow it from the library or from a friend, etc.? And I'm not going to go into this, but I might compare it when we take a look at the 2024 reading reflections and statistics. So yeah, 107 books, which is a lot. It's because I read a lot of chapbooks. So a chapbook is a small book, usually of poetry. It's usually under 40 pages. Some people might not count that as a book. I very much do because I make chapbooks. I'm a bookmaker as well. And I really actually want to reflect on even these small books that I read, and they are important to me. So to me, they definitely count as a book. Might seem weird if you're someone who reads like 800-page fantasy novels. So my reading reflections for the year, I like to do a lot of journaling in the book journal, what I like doing, what I want to improve on, etc. And then these are just, sometimes I do little fold-outs in the book, which I really like doing. I think they look super cool. So these are my favorite books of 2023. And one thing I will mention is that in 2023, I did not use 4.5 stars. Basically, like, it just intuitively, I didn't use it. I thought, oh, you know, if I'm going to make it a 4.5, I might as well make it a 5. And I realize now that I do want to note which are 4.5 and 5. So I guess I'll break it down for you now how I rate things, so that you can actually know what that means to me when I get into it. So I'll just use this as a little guide here. So first of all, I think I have one 1-star book in 2024. I really don't rate things 1 star because if I dislike a book that much, I'm just gonna DNF it. I'm a big fan of DNFing books. I know some people frown upon that, but I absolutely love to put down a book I'm not enjoying. This is 2 stars, so 2-star. Yeah, I kind of wish I didn't read that book. Really, it maybe offended me in some way, but I decided to keep reading. Something like that. 2.5. Enjoyed it a little more than a 2. I don't know. I don't often rate things 2 or 2.5. So a 3 is like just sort of a meh book. Like, I'm not mad that I read that book, but it was fine. 3.5 is like, oh, okay, yeah, it was pretty good. I can see it had some merits. 4-star is, yeah, I liked that book. Like, I liked it. It was a good book. I enjoyed reading it. Don't know if I'm going to think about it all that much more, but good book. I enjoyed it. A 4.5 is like, wow, that was a really good book. I really enjoyed that book. I'm going to tell people about that book. Really, really, I would say, okay, I loved that book. But a 5 is like, this is my absolute new favorite book. A 5 gets added to the favorite books category in my mind. So that, I think, has become the difference between the 4.5 and the 5. 4.5, loved it. Is it my favorite? No. But that's why I reserve a 5 for that now. And then, as you can see, I DNF a lot of books. Love to. So, the big old 2024 goals. So here are my goals for the year, and then here's my monthly reading tracker, which I really enjoyed doing. And actually, this year I made a 2-page spread of it to make it bigger. But anyway, my goals here. So I don't set like, I don't set a goal for the number of books that I read. That just isn't really important to me. It's more about what kind of books I'm reading, and what I want to be thinking about more deeply. Okay, so my first goal was only buy one book per month. As you can see, that is the only book that I would full on say that I failed at. So I think, like many readers, I get into kind of a bad habit of hearing about a book, it sounds really interesting, and then I buy it. And it all happens in the moment. It's a moment of excitement. Whereas what I did this year in 2024 was I used the library a lot more. And then if I really loved a book, I bought it afterwards, like if I really wanted it on my shelf. But that kept me from buying so many books that were just okay. And so I really like that system. I think in 2025, I'm going to try to stick to doing that because, yeah, it saves a lot of money and saves me from having a bunch of okay books. I definitely didn't fully stick to that. I kind of switched to more of a buying 2 books, I think actually is a better goal for me, buying 2 books a month. That feels reasonable. It leaves a little bit of room for excitement and spontaneity. Say if I'm going to a book fair or something, if I want to buy a friend's book, I go to a lot of book launches. And so that allows me to have a little bit more flexibility. Now, one thing, you'll see that these are all slashes, which to me is like I'm in progress with it. It's not fully completed. And I would say that's where we're at with read the book that I bought. We'll go through all the books that I bought later, but I read a good chunk of them. So partial success on that part. Another partial success would be to reread 1 book per month. We're going to actually go through each of these goals has a page, so we'll look at it more. Then we did reading through history, which is to read a book per month. So 12 books from 1990 to 1890. So there's like January is 1990, February is 1980. It'll make more sense when you look at the actual chart that I made. Read 6 short story collections authored by a person of color. So that's because I teach short stories, I teach English literature, and when I put together my sort of 101 syllabus, I just realized that I had kept reading poetry, I'd kept reading novels from my after my schooling, and I had read quite diversely and could reflect that in my syllabus, but in short stories I had just not kept reading short stories, and so it was sort of a bunch of old dead white people that I was teaching. And I would say my students are probably like 75%, if not more, non-white, and so that just did not sit well with me, that they would be that we would have such a bias in the syllabus that doesn't reflect the actual numbers in the class. So that's what that goal was about. And I actually in early 2024 have read a bunch of short story collections that definitely gets me up to 6. So that's kind of funny. Oh, and then I did complete that actually. So I sorted through all of my TBR shelves. So I had actual bookcases of books that I have not yet read. So that's something about me. And I got rid of about the same number of books that I sold. So that's pretty good. And then here are just some ideas for 2025. I like to jot down reading goals that I think of. So, monthly reading tracker. I really liked doing this. So the way that this works, you'll see these are all the different months. And the reason that I have 2 columns is that the first column, the lighter one, is what I read physically, the number of pages. And then I also read a lot of audiobooks because, as I mentioned about here at this camp, and it's totally off grid. So it's really a good thing. I can't just watch like garbage on YouTube, not like this excellent video and all the other book journal flip throughs, but I tend to watch a lot of stuff I'm not particularly interested in, so it's really a blessing to only be able to read audiobooks when I'm out here or listen to audiobooks. So this is the page numbers of the amount of pages I read, and then the darker column is the hours that I listen to on audiobook. And I did some research. There's really not a good way to equate these things, but I tried to equate across what am I trying to say? That I tried to equate pages read to hours listened as best I could on average. I figured that 50 pages is approximately 1.5 hours, 100 pages is approximately 3 hours. It really, really depends on the audiobook. So this is just an estimation. So here you can see in these winter months, this is especially when I was out at the camp, and really all of this, I was out at the camp a lot during this time. In March I was traveling and ironically just did not read a lot while traveling, just to see family and stuff. Not a big trip, but I was busy. So with the exception of that, you can see a ton of audiobook listening, especially during the months that I was at the camp. And then here, September, is when I both got married and was teaching. So I really, despite the fact that I was like reading the things that I was teaching, I just wasn't reading a huge volume of stuff because I was working more. So big dip here, and that's why. But yeah, I've got a weirdo little statistician's brain as well as a creative brain. So this is extremely pleasing to me. Oh, and they're supposed to look like books on a bookshelf. That's what these little like labels are. I got this from someone here on YouTube, I think, as well. So this is the Battle of the Books. Let me show you how it works and then tell you what I would do differently. So this is basically supposed to tell you what your favorite book of the year was. So as you can see, I stand by the fact that my favorite book of the year was Bear by Marian Engel. Oh my God, that book is good. And all three of these books are so good. Bear by Marian Engel, Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by, I can't remember her first name, but Tokarczuk is her last name. I believe she's Polish. And Outline by Rachel Cusk. So the thing I didn't like about this method, as you can see, we have December and January, February and March. They go like this. And so it would be, I just didn't have enough room to expand the brackets out and out. So basically December and January, you put your favorite book of December, your favorite book of January, and then you compare them to each other and say which was your favorite of the two. And I said Braiding Sweetgrass, which is not really a fair comparison because Braiding Sweetgrass is probably my favorite book of all time. And the only reason that it didn't surpass Bear is that I didn't want to prioritize a reread over something new. Like I thought it would be silly if my favorite book of the year was something I had already read. And my issue here in doing it month by month was that sometimes my favorite book of the month wasn't even necessarily a 5-star book. So I do think that this is technically effective in getting me to my favorite book of the year because a 5-star book is always going to be somewhere in here. But I think what I might like to do for next year is at the end of the year, write down all of my 5-star books and then compare 5 stars to 5 stars. I think that would be a little more representative. Okay, so this is a little bit of a silly thing that I did. So for the initiated, you know, DNF means did not finish. And so I just did like a little library card that I just made and put in this envelope I had on hand of books that I didn't actually finish. No reason other than that. It was just sort of cute and fun. And then we've got rereads. So this was one of my goals, as you saw. So I reread 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So even though I didn't read the full 12, I still consider that a win in that I reread 9 more books than I would have reread otherwise. Because I think, like many people, I'm just drawn to the new thing, hearing about something new. It's exciting. So my goal here was to reread some books that I considered to be favorites and see if they still were. So I'll go through those when we actually look at the pages, but that was really interesting. I'm glad I did this. This is one of my favorite pages. So as you can see, I had to flip it out here. So this was my reading through history challenge. The way that I did it was I read backwards from 1990 all the way back, and I was really enjoying this. If I hadn't not been reading very much in autumn, where I should have been reading in this era, I really think I would have fully completed this, but I was just so busy I didn't get a chance to read much. So you'll see it roughly goes backwards. So all of these blue books were in winter, pink was spring, green was summer, and then there are a couple of orange for fall scattered throughout. But my original goal or vision for this was that there would just be one book for each decade, right? In December, I would read a book from the 1990s. In January, I would read a book from the 1980s. But what ended up happening was that I just was sort of naturally reading some older books as well. So I put them on here as well, because why not? And then it got sort of this interesting subway map sort of look to it as I went. So I think the decade I read the most in was maybe the 1970s, which is interesting because I don't think of myself as particularly a 1970s reader, but here we are. So for the 1990s, I read Hotel Iris, 1996. I read Sailor Moon, which is the original Sailor Moon manga in Japanese, which was published from 1991 to 97. And then I read a book called It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken, which is a graphic novel by a Canadian, Seth. And for the 1980s, I read A Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I read Talk to My Back, which is actually another Japanese manga, serialized. And I read A Nun's Diary, which I really enjoyed, which is a Canadian poetry book. Then for the 1970s, I read Witchcraft and the Gay Counterculture. This was a really fun one, obviously. I'll talk more about it. I read Bear, Love, Winter Tree Finder, which is a practical guide. I have a few of these more practical guides you'll see pop up, almost encyclopedic books, because as I said, I'm off-grid here at the camp, and so if I need to look something up, I actually need a book. I know, wild. And then in the autumn, I read The Word for World is Forest by Ursula Le Guin. Oh, and I also read Illness as Metaphor and 84 Charing Cross Road. So yeah, a lot of 1970s books. And then it gets less and less, unfortunately. I actually really would like to challenge myself to read more in this period, because I think I could be surprised. But that I would find some books that I really enjoy. In the 1960s, I read A Single Man and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Really liked and really disliked. Very different visions of masculinity. In 1950s, I read Fahrenheit 451. That was a reread. For 1940s, I read 1984, another reread. 1930s, I read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. And then in the 1920s, I read The Enchanted April, which is actually by the same author, Elizabeth von Arnim, as this 1890 book, Elizabeth and Her German Garden. So I read this book, and then it inspired me to read this book sort of ahead of schedule, if you're thinking of this schedule here. So we'll talk more about each of those as we come to them. I really love this. How this spread looks, and I would love to do it again. Like, I was actually thinking maybe I would start at 1910 and go back and see if I could read a bunch of 1800s books. So here's my short story collection. So I've actually gone on to read more, but here I had pre-drawn these books for myself to color in when I read them. And the reason this has a green little aura around it is that I got it from the library, and then it had to go back, and I had to wait to actually get it back from the library. So I read it partially in spring, which is pink, and partially in summer, which is green. And then this books to buy page, for real. I might, or I'm not doing it this year. I didn't really end up reading it. What I've switched over to is to just have a note in my phone of books I want to look out for at the thrift store, especially. And that just makes more sense because I filled up this page kind of quickly. It was also always changing, so it doesn't really make sense to actually have it written down. And then when I go to a bookstore, a used bookstore, I might not actually have, or I almost certainly won't have my book journal with me. So it just makes more sense to have that on my phone. Okay. So here it is. This is the book buying tracker. So the way that I do it is month by month, and my little key here is that if I purchased a book myself, I use the larger circle, and if I acquired it, so if it was, sometimes books are given to me by publishers, or if someone buys me a book as a gift, something like that, so I didn't actually spend money on it, then I just do a smaller bullet point, and obviously it's checked off when it's read, or if you see a slash through it, that means it's being read, but I guess you wouldn't see that here because this year is over. Oh, never mind, I lied, there's one. So this is because I sort of put this book on pause. It's more of an art book, something to dip into, which I struggle to know how to talk about in the book journal because it's neither finished nor not finished. I picked it up and sort of looked at it and really enjoyed it, but it's not necessarily the kind of book that you read cover to cover. So if anyone has any tips on how you would categorize something like that, I sort of created a on pause feature in my reading wrap up, as opposed to, like, I didn't DNF the book. I didn't choose to not finish it because I didn't like it. It was really that I just put it down for now. So I also bought The Reorigin of Species, which I read, and then I reread the John Klassen books, so the Hatbox Trilogy and The Skull, which I both love. In January, I bought, finally, it's ridiculous, so I had only ever listened to the audiobook of Braiding Sweetgrass, but I bought myself a really beautiful sort of commemorative version of Braiding Sweetgrass. I also, at the same time, from Milkweed Editions, I believe, I pre-ordered You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World anthology, edited by Ada Limon, which I read in the summer. I got 2 of these little guidebooks, so Winter Weed Finder and Winter Tree Finder. I only read the Winter Tree Finder. And then Christine, my good friend, sent me a copy of The Enchanted April, which was really sweet, so we could both read it. In February, I was selling some used books, I was selling to a used bookstore, and then I used a bit of my credit to buy some new books. Whoops. So Illness as Metaphor by Susan Sontag and Nun's Diary by Anne Diamond, which I had never heard of and impulsively bought, and it was so good. That was awesome. And then Skin by Mariko and Jillian Tamaki, which I still haven't read, but I just seen it around for so long, and I had read Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me the previous year and really enjoyed it, so I'm sure I'll really enjoy Skim as well. March, I got Birds of Eastern Canada. That's another reference book, which I said I read. It's not like I read every single page of it, but I used it a lot. Another Order by Judith Coppathorne, which was a book that was sent to me because I was participating in the launch. And then Medium by Joanna Skipsred. I bought that at a launch. In April, I went to a bookstore with the aforementioned Christine and bought a few books. I'm really looking forward to I Who Have Never Known Men and just haven't read it yet, like for no freaking reason. It might be a little bit of a mashed potato, as they say on the Books Unbound podcast, which I'll talk about because I talk about mashed potatoes later. So I got some poetry books. So Quiet Night Think by Gillian Say, which I read. Frank Sonnets by Diane Seuss, and Gray All Over, which is funny. I'm literally reading that right now by Andrea Actis. Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century was, I requested it as a desk copy from Cochess Books because I had borrowed it from the library when I read it and loved it. See, that's exactly what I mean. If I really enjoy a library book, then I can buy it or acquire it in some way. I got it as a desk copy because I really want to teach some of the short stories in it, as I mentioned. And then we have Woven Histories, Textiles and Modernist Abstraction. My partner got that for me as a sweet and lovely gift because I'm a big textiles nerd as well. In May, I bought some more of these guides for the camp, none of which I read. And then 2 books about beavers, so just all reference books for the camp. We have a lovely family of beavers right next to us, so I've just really enjoyed learning about them. In June, I got some poetry books. Oh, I got some books which I read this year. They belong up in the previous month. I got Against Capture, a small poetry book, The Folded Clock, and Goldenrod. Again, none of which I read, so you can see I'm going back to my old ways of just buying books and not reading them, so tisk tisk. And then I also went to the Ottawa Small Press Fair. So you can see these are both small press fairs where I do inevitably end up buying books from, or trading, as you see, with people who are there. And that I really don't mind. I really enjoy that. And then I bought my friend's book, Listening in Many Publics. In July, these were 2 great books. So All Fours by Miranda July and The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. That one I bought and read right away, and that one I listened to first and then bought. So this is like an ideal month here. Excellent. In August, I got The Garden Against Time by Olivia Lang. I listened to the audiobook of that and loved it, and I think I just want to own all of Olivia Lang's books. She's definitely a favorite writer of mine. And then this was a bit of an impulse buy. Autobiography of a Death is a poetry book by Kim Hye-sun, I believe a Korean writer. And in September, I bought Erasing Frankenstein, which is a really excellent book. I flipped through it, not fully read it yet, but it is a bunch of female inmates in prison who did erasure poetry, where you cross out part of a text to make a new text, with Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein. And they are just incredible, beautiful, heartbreaking. I would really, really recommend this book. I'm excited to actually sit down and read it in full, as well as some of the essays that go with it. Oh, well, that's not actually it because I just ran out of room, but we'll encounter the rest of them later, and now we'll get into the books themselves. Okay, sorry, I had to take a little bit of a break there. I was getting a little bit chilly, so I had to throw another log on the fire. Can you hear it crackling? Cozy. And get my little hot water bottle. So let's take a look at the actual book pages themselves. So this one is not very good. This was my very first attempt. I consider it to be pretty ugly. Clearly had to test some things out. And also, I didn't like this book. So let's just carry on. So this is a page, a spread that I actually really like for how nicely these images come together. So again, those are just images that come out of the Shopping in New York book. I got so lucky with this book. Every page looks incredible. So the reason especially that I wanted to do these include the sort of collage elements. So collage is just art style that I work a lot with in general. I'm a big paper lover. But I also knew that I wanted to have a typical way of breaking down every book, which you can see here. But I thought if each page is just that, it's going to look extremely boring. And so incorporating a little bit of collage into it keeps it really interesting and more organic looking. So every page is different just because I put an image in it somewhere. So I'll break it down for you. I'm not going to break down every single page. I'll make sure that it all looks good so that you can pause at any point and zoom in and read about anything that you want to read about. But we're just going to be here all night if I actually talk in full about every single book. So we're going to go somewhat quickly as we get going. But to break it down for you, the way that each page works is that we have the title. The number here is which number of book that, how do I say? This is the second book that I read. This is the third book that I read. You know what I mean. So I have the author, the publisher, the format of the book. So was it a physical book? Was it an audiobook, or occasionally some kind of digital copy? The genre, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, etc. The subject of the book. So was this is kind of like free form. I just try to describe the book a little bit, what it's about. Again, as I mentioned, I like to do some journaling, and this is just gets me thinking about the book a little bit more deeply. Likewise, I'll jump ahead. Likewise, I really like this question. I stole that from the pre-made book journal that I used the previous year, and it asks why I chose this book. Why did you even choose to read this book right now? Which I think is an interesting question to stop and reflect on. What is appealing to me about this book right now? So then I note the length of the book. This I listened to as an audiobook, and then the day that I started and finished it. And so when I'm just like setting up this page, I'm still reading the book. I don't fill in anything below that. But when I'm done, I rate the book, and then I write a review. And then I say, again, this was from that previous book journal that I really liked. Would I recommend this book to someone, yes or no? So this book was really interesting in that I felt like I should have liked it more, and I actually recently bought it because I would like to reread it, and I think I just didn't like the audiobook recording. It just ticks every box for me, so I'm gonna come back to it. This was Cold Enough for Snow, a New Directions book. I thought this one was good, not great. Again, had some really interesting things that I liked. And if we go to 27, there were some quotes that I really enjoyed. It was very contemplative, quite poetic. Now, hopefully what you'll see right now is either a blur or a decorative covering of some sort. So as I said, because I am a Canadian author and a lot of the people who I read are my peers, could potentially watch this video, I treat this book journal 100% honestly, and so there's gonna be some books that I did not necessarily really like, and so I say that privately to myself in this journal in a way that I don't want to say publicly. And so what I've opted for is just any book that's written by someone that I know. I'm just not going to talk about it, because if I only didn't talk about the books that I didn't like, well then it's obvious the ones that I like and didn't like. So I'm just gonna take the high road, I guess, on this one, and just not talk about books that I don't want to talk about, even if I do want to talk about them and really enjoyed them. So the 5th book that I read was Hotel Iris. I didn't like this book that much. If I remember correctly, I don't often say this, but it could have been longer. It's a very rare thing that I'll say about a book. Usually I'll always say it could have been shorter. But because it did end up being kind of about BDSM, this image is just chef kiss. It's so perfect. A Handmaid's Tale. Okay. I have some feelings about Margaret Atwood, but in a to keep this video calm and cozy, I'll just say that I thought that she did not actually do a very good job of pulling off the concept of this book. If you want to like read more about what I have to say, and it goes over onto page 38, you can read my comments. But yeah, I was disappointed by this one because it was about some themes that I really would enjoy. So there's some things I still think about this book, but it's not a book I would say that I really enjoyed all that much on a sentence to sentence level. So as I said, Braiding Sweetgrass, I absolutely love. I did not leave myself enough room. I don't know what I was thinking with this. So I gave it just the tiniest little review, but I mean, I already know that I love this book. And I would absolutely tell you to read the audiobook, because Robin Wall Kimmerer reads it herself, and she has such a loving and grandmotherly voice. Really love this book. So this is the first of the quick reads pages. As you can see, this is a little essay that I read. This is an article that I read online. Yeah, another essay. So I like to just reflect on the book. Often, you know, I call the things that I write in here reviews, but really it's much more so just me reflecting on my experience of reading the book. Also, the reason that I opted, you know, a year or two ago to start writing a book journal was because I didn't want to use something like Goodreads or Storygraph to chart my reading, because I didn't want to write public reviews. And again, that's why I'm opting not to share some of the books in this collection. And I hope you can understand and respect that. Because I want to actually take the time to do like personal journaling and reflecting on the book. So my ratings, my reviews are really just my personal experience, and I didn't want to give a purely honest review online somewhere where the author could see it in a way that I would give a purely honest review when I'm journaling. So that's why I like to reflect on everything I read. And here's the rest of the Handmaid's Tale. If you want to take a look at it, pause, read. You can see I did enjoy it. There are some quotes that I really liked. Witchcraft and the Gay Counterculture. So while this is one that I DNF'd, I also, it also gave me a lot to think about. Primarily the final The final chapter, I really enjoyed, and you can hear me. Obviously, I had a lot to think about in reading this book, so that was definitely an interesting one, and that would be a cool one to own, actually. I should think about buying this one as well. I would really enjoy having that on my shelf. Some more quick reads, reread the Jon Klassen books again. And then there's Talk to My Back by Yamada Murasaki. I actually didn't really end up liking this one in a way that I really thought that I would. Yeah, I think... Well, what did I have to say? I have a lot of respect for this book and author as important to historical feminism, but I just wasn't interested in these mundane depictions of wife and motherhood. Yeah, this is what I remember as well. As someone who isn't a mother, and has, even though I have a husband, we have a pretty non-traditional relationship and living situation. While I'm really glad that this book exists and was written, and that people can share these narratives, it just wasn't for me. But if this is interesting to you, like if these topics are interesting to you, I do recommend this book. There's Cook Like Your Ancestors. This is a book that I saw at a bookstore, and then I didn't necessarily want to... It was like pretty expensive, like $40 or more, but I did want to try it out, and so I actually requested it at the library. And I don't know if you guys often will request things from your library. This is a tip that a librarian friend gave to me, and it's just magical. You ask your library to buy a book, and then they just buy it, and then my library just sends it directly to me, like to my local library, and tells me when it's in. So it's like a book being bought for you. It's just amazing. This ended up being one of my favorite books of the year. No one is talking about this. So this is by Patricia Lockwood. I was just reflecting the other day on how I own, I think, all of her books, except her very first poetry book. But they're all in different sections. So she has 2 poetry books, a nonfiction book, Priest Daddy, and this one, which is fiction, that was obviously autofiction. And it's so funny that, you know, she's all alone on every shelf, but if we were to put all her books together, she'd have friends. So she's definitely a favorite writer of mine. I really love her work. Oh, and this is a continuation. So this is a cool thing where I knew I didn't have that much more to say, and so I actually took an entire page out of the New York shopping book and just wrote over the section that would have had writing on it. This was a little bit of an impulse read. I thought it was okay. A Nun's Diary. So this is the poetry book that I randomly picked up, and I liked it so much. Yeah, it was really enjoyable. I would really recommend, if you like some of these themes around sort of female rage, asceticism. It's not a real nun's diary, I should say. It's very surreal, absurdist, actually, where God comes to live with the nuns in the cloister, ? The nunnery. And he's just a shitty dude that needs to be taken care of. Time Traveler's Wife. So random that I would even try to read this. I did not like it at all. Work Won't Love You Back. This was a really great read, and I ended up buying it for my partner as well, for him to read. This is a book about beavers, and I love beavers. They're just delightful, and I really enjoyed learning about them. So if you would like to learn about beavers, I would recommend this book. Here's a picture of a beaver. Why was that in that book? Incredible. Bear. Yes. I don't know why I used purple on this. I must have just not had the blue with me or something, because that doesn't make sense. Oh my god, I forgot about this quote. Incredible. Bear, she cried, I love you, pull my head off. Just, if you want to know anything about me, read this book. This is just everything to me. It's actually, yeah, as I said, perhaps my new favorite book of all time. So it has a woman living alone in the woods for a summer, quite isolated. She is living with a bear who she ends up having sex with in quite a surreal way. It's not like a creepy bestiality book. It's very much like a fairy tale in that sense. Otherwise, there's a lot of realism to it. She is a book historian, so she's there researching books. She's in this gorgeous historical house on this island. She's out in nature, being weird with nature. It just has everything I want. It's the perfect book. Did I miss a page? What is this from? What's continued on 50? I did miss a page. Oh my goodness. Okay, so 58 is a continuation of A Single Man. You can tell I also loved this book because I had a lot to say about it. I really, really enjoyed this book. Gorgeous writing, and I would love to read more from Christopher Isherwood. The only reason I gave it 4.5 stars, there was, I think, yeah, misogyny and racism peppered in, which I'll be generous and say that's a 1960s thing, but yeah, it definitely detracted from the book. You know, I would be absolutely enthralled and loving it, and then there would just be a comment that made me, ugh. So that definitely took away from it, but otherwise I adored this book around living as a gay man in the 1960s, around grief at your partner having died, but you can't really actually talk about them being your partner. Just stunning on a sentence level. And this, I believe, is a continuation from Work Won't Love You Back, and this was a really fun way to integrate into the shape of the original drawing. No, not drawing, picture. Ah, okay, this is fun. This really wants to stand up. So this is the Winter Tree Finder book, and that's great. But what I really love here is that my library started doing bingo. My library started doing bingo, so of course I had to do it. I'm sorry if you don't read French. I have to do a little translation. But this was so fun. So they did a winter bingo, and then you'll see later there's also a summer bingo. I just popped in to see if they were doing a winter, and they weren't, which is extremely rude and a personal attack on me. But I'm going to keep going back and keep asking because I want it. I find this delightful. And I like having it integrated in here. Also, I filled out a second version and submitted it to the library because if you get a line, you actually get submitted for a gift card to your local favorite indie bookstore. So that's super cute. Ah, okay, so this is something I had actually been intending to be doing statistic pages every quarter at the end of every season, but it just ended up being a little too much for me. I'm a busy gal. So I just did it for the first quarter here, and it's kind of wild how many hours I listen to on audiobook, and that's really because I'm out at the camp and just listening to audiobooks all the time when I'm out here. Instead of like watching, streaming, whatever, I'm just sit down and listen to audiobooks all night. And then often when I'm cooking and eating, I'm listening to audiobooks. So I end up listening to a lot. So if in previous years when I wasn't out at the camp and wasn't listening to audiobooks, my reading would have been much smaller, my overall number. But as it is, I love it. So we get into spring here. This is funny. This is sort of, you could see in the reading tracker, the book pages tracker at the beginning, there were so few pages in March read, and this would also explain it. This was meh March. I really just was not feeling a lot of things that I was reading. So that definitely had something to do with it, as well as traveling. And then here's my quick reads page. So just a few little things. I think these were mostly things from the book fair that I went to that I picked up. Just really small things. I said I know that I usually treat zines as their own, they get their own pages, but here, these are so small. They're literally a pamphlet, so I ended up just putting in quick reads. So here is the maze book that I mentioned before. So yeah, it's just sort of on pause, but if you're interested in mazes, in labyrinths, this is a really interesting book. Really beautifully made. So since I started listening to audiobooks so much, because I'm a poet myself and I like to read a lot of poetry, I realized, hey, what if I were to actually listen to some audiobooks of poetry? I love going to poetry readings. I love hearing poets read. And so I started to download what few audiobooks of poetry there are. And so this was the first one. This is a poet I didn't know before. I'm going to move forward. You can see I actually typed out one of the poems that I did like, but overall I didn't really like this book. I'll leave it for a second in case you want to read that. I had to freewheel on the line breaks. I knew it was a sonnet, but I did not actually have it in front of me, so that's my best guess. But yeah, was not really a fan of these poems in particular, and after having listened to a number of poetry audiobooks, I'm not sure it's a format that I like, because I want to actually read a poem more than once, and I might read a poem sort of out of order on the page, and it's just a different experience that doesn't lend itself to being as linear as an audiobook is. So I'm glad that they exist, but I've discovered it's maybe not for me. Let me know if you recommend any specific audiobooks of poetry that I'm missing out on, maybe, but I'm willing to give it a shot again, but I don't think it's necessarily what I'm looking for. Then I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because it's one of my dad's favorite books. I did not like this book. I mean, it was okay. It was quite beautifully written, but it really was just around, like, there was so much toxic masculinity. Let's see what I said to refresh my memory. I loved elements of this book: the defiance of authority, an examination of how systems of domination operate, and the depictions of mental illnesses, especially the humanization of those living with mental illnesses. But the misogyny and racism were so rampant it made it difficult to enjoy the book. Plus the way that the main character was made into a hero while being such a disgusting figure of toxic masculinity. No thanks. Yeah, that's all coming back now. Yeah, there was some really cool stuff, as I mentioned there, but So it was sort of like a 4 into 2 or a 5 into 1, and so it got middled into a 3. So Bunny, I ended up not liking this as much as I thought I would. I'm not typically into horror or anything like that, but it sounded like an interesting concept, and I just wasn't super into her writing style, or I just feel like she didn't necessarily pull it off. So yeah, not mad about it, but it was a 3 for me. Where the Crawdads thing is such a weird book for me to read. It was lent to me by my uncle. So here out at the camp, as I mentioned, these obvious reasons I mentioned are that we live beside a beaver pond, it's very swampy, and so I'm often out here alone by choice. This is my little den of solitude, and I thought a book about a woman who lives alone in a swamp sounded kind of interesting. But it did end up being really about romance, mystery, or like a thriller more than I wanted. So yeah, it wasn't for me in a way that I definitely thought it wasn't for me. Exploring the Roots of Religion. This was a Great Courses course that I bought on not Amazon, Audible, owned by Amazon, years ago before I stopped using Audible because it's owned by Amazon. And it was super interesting, and I just never actually finished it. So I believe the reason I restarted it was because I was out at the camp here, and sometimes my Libby app, which is how I download audiobooks from my library, sometimes my Libby app will decide that it's not working and didn't actually download the audiobook that it said that it did before. So left with nothing to read, I finally finished something I wanted to finish. So this was a bit of a funny thing I tried to do. I have Mary Oliver's book, Devotions, which is a big old, like, 500-page poetry book, and I'm a fan of hers, so I thought it could be fun to read her poetry from her oldest to newest by reading them almost as individual books. You'll see that's how I broke it down here. And I just didn't end up continuing with it, but it's something I would absolutely come back to. I was really enjoying this. So I left myself some room and didn't finish, but oh well, we'll get back to it when we get back to it. No rush with poetry. The Classic 50 Poems. This is another poetry audiobook I tried out. Yeah, it was fine. It was funny because they say, chosen by the people. It was not. It was all very classic books that you would be taught in a poetry class. So that was a bit funny. And then some more quick reads here. You Are Here. So this is the anthology that I mentioned. The anthology that I mentioned reading or buying along with Braiding Sweetgrass. My bird book, again, it's a little hard to know exactly how to put a reference book in here, or when I'm tracking pages. Okay, how many pages did I read? It's not really how reference books work, so I did my best. And Fahrenheit 451, I was surprised. I really remember really loving this when I read it, maybe when I was around 20, and interesting to reread because I really didn't enjoy it so much on the next read. But I keep thinking about things that were in this book since I reread it. It really predicted some things, especially around social media, really, really accurately, how emotionally attached we will become to screens. 1984, one of my favorite books of the year. Oh my god, I think this was so wasted on me as a 15, 16-year-old or whenever I read it. I remembered this stuff like doublethink and but I did not remember, I did not appreciate just how excellently written it is. Really, really loved it, and so much to think about. Yeah. If you're interested, I'll stop. There's more written on page 90, but you can pause and read what I had to say, but really loved that. Some more quick reads here. A Nice Cup of Tea by George Orwell, on how to make the perfect cup of tea. Okay, so here you'll see these little stickers that I made, which I actually just printed out and cut up and paste in here. But certified mashed potatoes. So the idea of a mashed potato comes from the Books Unbound podcast. If you're a book lover, you love hearing people talk about books, I would really recommend listening to the Books Unbound podcast. I love it a lot. But they have this concept of the mashed potato book, and it's that, you know, it comes from the idea that if you love mashed potatoes so much as the hosts do, that at, say, turkey dinner, Christmas dinner, you leave the mashed potatoes on your plate, saving them to the end, and then when you finally get to them, oh, they're actually cold and not so good anymore. So the idea here with a book that you are so excited about and you're saving it until the right time, or maybe you're paradoxically, let me know if you also feel this way, because I definitely do. You're so excited to read something, and then so you don't read it. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it seems that I'm not the only one who does it. Like I Who Have Never Known Men that I mentioned. So excited to read it. I haven't read it yet. It's been almost a year. So these are mashed potato books that in Mashed Potato May I finally got to. It's a challenge to read your mashed potato books in May. So first one, big failure. Illness as Metaphor by Susan Sontag. I have been looking forward to reading this book for so long, and it just really let me down. Really shocked by that. I actually took the epigraph from my book that is coming out in a month or so. It used to be from Illness as Metaphor, and I took it out because I really didn't like the book. And then Time as a Mother. Again, this is one that I listened to as an audiobook. And here I just noted down some of my poems that I liked from it, but I actually ended up buying this book physically because, again, I don't think I necessarily enjoy reading poetry as an audiobook. I wanted to spend more time with the poems, see how they're laid out on the page, etc. Anishinaabemowin. So this is a ebook / like printout that I printed out about an indigenous language. Anishinaabemowin is the indigenous language of the Anishinaabe people. So I live on, or this cabin, this camp is on Anishinaabe land, and so I just wanted to learn more about the language and the culture, and be able to know the original words for some of the things I encounter out in nature here, the beings I encounter in nature. This is a medicinal plant book. Again, this is one that, it's a reference book, so I didn't necessarily DNF it, but I sort of come to it occasionally. Not sure how to categorize books like this. Let me know in the comments if you have a book journal or use Goodreads or Storygraph or whatever. What do you do with books that are more of a reference book? How do you know when you're done a reference book? Oh, and here's the rest of 1984 if you want to read that. Her Body and Other Parties. Loved this book. Carmen Maria Machado is another favorite author of mine, and I can't believe I hadn't read this short story collection. I'd wanted to read it forever. Some are better than others, but that's just how it is with a short story collection. But they were all delightfully weird. which is what I really loved. I first read her book, I think it's called Welcome to the Dream House, or maybe just The Dream House. And that book is excellent as well. She plays with genre a lot. She's so great. Really recommend her. Oh yeah, The Girls by Emma Cline. This is the only book I did this for where I just decided not to write a review, and I really regret it. I really like having time to reflect on all of the books that I read, so yeah, I loved it. Gave it a 4.5, and now I just have sort of my memories, and I don't have my actual thoughts from the moment. As you can tell, I actually reread those to remind me of what I thought of the book. So, yeah, big L on that one. Won't be doing that again. Some more quick reads here. You can see I read the Chainsaw Guide because I bought a chainsaw. I read a whole chapter of a book that I have called Back to Basics, which I love, all about woodworking. So yeah, I really put everything in here. Oh yeah, didn't like this book, A Line Made by Walking. I randomly picked it up at the library and really was not feeling it. The Enchanted April, that was a gift from Christine, and this was just a really, it was both sort of lighthearted, but also took a really earnest look at 4 different women in 4 different stages of their life, from different economic backgrounds. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Ugh, yes. Love this book. Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. Again, just a woman out in nature, being extremely weird. This is my ideal book. I've developed a genre in my mind called Women in Solitude, and I would love to teach a class about this. Design a class where we talk about women in solitude in literature. It's extremely fascinating to me. So, really excellent book with way more plot than I'm used to. It's really sort of a murder mystery, so that was very cool. I usually read pretty plotless books. This is still the same one, continued. Yeah, I have a lot of favorite quotes as well. Especially, you'll see I write down quotes from books when I read the audiobook, and it's so I don't sort of lose those favorite quotations. Sometimes if I buy the physical book close to when I read the audiobook, I'll just sort of transcribe, I'll underline the sections in the physical book, but if not, because I haven't been able to find this book secondhand, unfortunately, which is how I try to get most books. So here are the quotes I love, right in my darling book journal. Sailor Moon. What is the subject? Sailor Moon. This was just sort of fine for me. I think I just didn't really like the genre of, like the form of manga. But I still have so much love for watching Sailor Moon when I was a kid on TV. I absolutely love Sailor Moon. Oh, On Writing by Stephen King. So I'm not a Stephen King person. Again, I'm not a horror person, so that's pretty much why. But I really enjoyed this On Writing book. While I didn't love the first part where he spoke about his life, although I did think it was interesting. I think all the quotes all of the quotes that I wrote down came from the second half where he's really talking about writing and his opinions on writing. And I liked his voice. It was very no nonsense, matter of fact, sort of common sense style. And I like how he imparted advice, that it wasn't necessarily how you had to do it, but just sort of his opinion on what works for him. And I underlined some really good stuff here, so if you want to take a look. And it continues here. I like this. It's all on the table, all up for grabs. Isn't that an intoxicating thought? I think it is. Try any goddamn thing you like, no matter how boringly normal or outrageous. If it works, fine. If it doesn't, toss it. Toss it even if you love it. If it doesn't work, toss it. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading his thoughts on writing. This is a book that I borrowed from the library, kind of impulsively, because there was a Carmen Maria Machado essay in it, and I really liked her essay, but overall, with any anthology, things are just mixed, so it wasn't really for me. This was Elizabeth and Her German Garden. As much as I really enjoyed von Arnhem's first book that I read, really did not like this one. My Name is Lucy Barton. Heard about this on the Books Unbound podcast, and I love autofiction, but it was kind of just boring. The Vegetarian, so good. So this was a reread for me, and absolutely is still a 5-star. No contest on that one. I've read 3 of Han Kang's books, but I haven't read her 2 most recent ones, so I should really get back to that because, yeah, I love her work a lot. Some more quick reads here. Oh yeah, this is a continuation. If you notice, there's more quotes here from the Carmen Maria Machado book, Her Body and Other Stories, and Other Parties, Her Body and Other Parties. And this is the spring bingo card from my library. So they did winter and spring. And then, or I guess summer, sorry, not spring. Estival. So that's a summer one. And shamefully, I didn't actually complete any lines in this one. You can see ones that I thought I could easily do, but I honestly also didn't try. So if I was trying, I easily could have done it. So anything I did get was things that I just sort of happened to do. But still, I think this is so fun. I really hope they do another one. The thing is, I already set reading goals for myself, so if I was looking for reading prompts, I would fill it like every one of these. But I already am quite busy every month with my goals. This was really cool. So I got a bunch of zines from someone and read them all. So instead of doing the typical format, I thought I'll just write down all the zines here. I know this kind of breaks my rule of not showing you things from people I know, but this was just, I like how this page turned out. And All Four is by Miranda July. I'm also a really big Miranda July fan, so I think I pretty much love everything she writes. Actually, I wasn't a fan of The First Bad Man, her first novel. And I think I was the only one in the world, so let me know. Were you a fan of that book, or is it just me out here? It's a Good Life If You Don't Weaken is, it was originally serialized, and then some of the comics were put into this book together. It was sort of moody. Didn't love it, but it was good. It's also from the 90s in Toronto, and I'm from the 90s in the 2010s, so it was cool to see that. This is me trying to give Stephen King a chance. Reading his book Joyland, because it wasn't a horror, but I didn't really enjoy it. Yeah. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I've wanted to read her for a very long time. So I really liked this book, but also, here's if you want to see the quotes. I didn't feel super engaged with the plot of it, but the writing on a sentence-to-sentence level was just incredibly beautiful. So I wonder if I would maybe prefer something else from her. Like I could see a different book from her for me being a 5-star book, because her writing was just exquisite. The Hard Tomorrow was a reread, and yeah, I had the same issue with it as the first time I read it, where the ending was really just kind of almost non-existent. But I like a lot of the themes in the book, so I don't know. The Art of Gathering. I really enjoyed this book. This was recommended on the Books Unbound podcast, and it gave me a lot to think about in planning our wedding, which is why I wanted to get it, but also as a teacher. It gave me a lot to think about as a teacher, as someone who hosts events, all kinds of things. So if you're interested in those, really recommend this book. Small Acts of Disappearance. Oh, I almost forgot what this book was, so that tells you something. Yeah, I DNF'd this book. It wasn't particularly good. Sorry. The Garden Against Time. Loved it. Love Olivia Lang. Gave me so much to think about. I always come out of her books with people I want to look into more. Yeah, really enjoyed that book. That was a no-brainer. And here's the rest of the book buying tracker. So the main thing you'll see here, I'll just note that I went to Berlin to a book fair and to meet other publishers. So yes, I bought a bunch of. So a funny thing happened, which was really not funny at all. And that's that my phone ran out of storage and I had to download the video, yada yada. It's the next night, so I tried to set things up as nicely as I can and start back where we were, but that was frustrating. Tonight, it's chamomile and lavender tea. It's a little later than last night. Just for anyone who's following along. So I think I talked about this sheet, but I just wanted to add that this was the little note that I made for myself about, to make myself feel a little better about buying books, because, oh look, I sold books. So I sold a bunch of books as well, which I think ended up being about equivalent to the number of books I bought. So is that good? I mean, net neutral? Oh, it's so Life of Pi. I chose this image because I haven't really been talking much about the images, but this one I couldn't find, the obvious, a tiger. So I chose just an image that reflected some of the colors on the cover that I had in this case. And the orange works. So yeah, Life of Pi was one of the rereads that I did. And yeah, did not hold up as much as I thought it would. For years, I read it as a teenager, and for years I said it was my favorite book. And it definitely no longer is. No, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't there for me anymore. The Myth of Normal. See, this is one of those books that I've sort of paused, and if you can think of a way to sort of rate this, I guess putting it on pause is a thing, as opposed to DNF, because I would like to come back to this, but it was making me such a hypochondriac. So yeah, The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture. I just felt like my trauma was making me sick, or that's what this book was convincing me of, and I didn't know what to do about that, so I had to put it down because it was just sort of upsetting me. But I wrote down, a bunch of quotations from it. Accidental blank page here, but I was really enjoying it, actually, and I guess I'll come back to it when I'm no longer chronically ill. So here's another quick read. So you can see that I was reading a whole bunch for class at this time for the different classes that I teach. And I also read, these are 2 books that I DNF'd, and I just didn't feel like making a full page for them, especially because I was so busy at this time. So they just got little mentions here. The word for world is forest. I think I've discovered that I don't really like Ursula K. Le Guin. I've also read The Left Hand of Darkness, and I think I really love her ideas, but I don't think I like hard fantasy, I guess is what she's called. But I always really love whenever I hear a quote from her, or a speech from her. So I think what I want to do, I know she has at least 1 essay collection, and so I think I want to read an essay collection from her. I think I would enjoy that. Outline, you probably saw my Battle of the Books. This is one of my favorite books of the year. As I said, I had just gotten married, and so it has a lot. I mean, it has a lot about divorce, but in talking about divorce, it also, of course, she talks a lot about marriage and what the family is and what it does. And so I really, really enjoy, I love autofiction, so this is just really intelligent, beautifully written sort of autofiction. Rebel Girl. So this is one that I had on the Libby app as an audiobook, and then the hold lapsed before I could finish it. So I actually finished reading this in my new reading journal. If you want to see that, leave a comment, let me know if people are actually interested or not. So these were the last 2 books that I read, and while they weren't, as you can tell from the star ratings, they weren't my favorite books ever. I really enjoyed the process of reading these books. So as you can tell, they're both audiobooks, and they are both only about 2 hours. They're almost the exact same length, which is wild. And what I did was I came out to the camp here, and in the evening, just like you would sit down to watch a movie, I sat down and I was knitting or crocheting, I don't remember, and I just listened to these all in one shot. And I really enjoyed that experience. It was like being told a story in a very organic way. So if you have any recommendations of short books that I can get on audiobook, that based on if you've watched this far, I think you probably have a sense of what I like. Yeah, let me know, because I really enjoyed this process. So I would either recommend this process or ask you for recommendations for more short books like this. So, what you've all been waiting for. This is the year in review. So all of my stats, as well as just some interesting numbers. So I'll actually go through it with you guys, because I'm sure some people are here for the art, but I'm sure a lot of people are also here for the numbers. So the way I make this is I just, I go through my book, my reading journal at the end of the year, which is really fun to go back through it, and just pop everything into an Excel spreadsheet, and it makes these graphs for me. I've seen some people redraw the graphs, which is really pretty, but I couldn't be bothered. It seemed like too much work. Many of you may say, what are you talking about? That's too much work, but this is fun for me. So yeah, let's take a look at here. I think this is interesting. So total books read is 84. The previous year is 107. So I was reading a lot more that year, but I think what happened was that I read more poetry or chapbooks. And so I ended up with a lot more books read. But as I said, I really don't care about the number of books I read. I'm also aware that 84 is still a lot of books, like a lot. So the number of pages read, 6,392 pages. And then hours listened, 234 hours, 38 minutes, which really blows my mind when you see it all added up like that. This to me doesn't seem like a lot of pages, but maybe if I saw over 6,000 pages of books all stacked up, it would look like a lot. It's just that I know some people read like ridiculously huge fantasy series, and the books that I like to read, I specifically like to read short books. It's just a form that I like, and poetry books. 6,000 versus 234 hours. 234 hours really blows my mind. Okay, so the other number was books acquired. Okay, you guys, if the goal was to buy 12 books, this is a certified failure. This is embarrassing. That's really bad. But like I noted here, a third of those I bought kind of all in one go in Berlin. And also remember, these little chapbooks I also count as books. So this doesn't mean I've bought 62 full-on books. Some of these are like maybe 10 pages long. So this was interesting to me, how many I purchased, 48 books versus how many I acquired, so were given to me or whatever. And then percentage of new books that I read. So this, I would definitely want to have that higher. And again, the Berlin number really skewed it, buying those 19 books. In Berlin, it would have been a lot higher. So I only read 36% of the books that I bought or acquired. So that fed into, I think I already mentioned, but I have a goal this year in 2025 to read all of the books that I bought last year. And that's going pretty well so far. I'm in month 3 now, just started. So how many books I sold and donated is 60. So that's not too bad. I mean, in terms of what's on the shelves, we sort of stayed at a neutral. I made it a goal in 2024 to get rid of some books, because I could tell that there were books on my TBR shelves that I had just had for so long. You probably have the same thing, that I was just no longer interested in reading them, if I was being honest with myself. I try to ask myself, would I pick up this book? Like, would I buy it at a store now? And if the answer was no, then I got rid of it. So if we take a look at the format of the books, I did it a little bit different from last year. Last year I counted if something was softcover or hardcover, and then I realized I didn't care about that. But comparing the number of physical books to audiobooks is super interesting to me. So 42 physical books and 37 audiobooks, which is interesting because I often feel like I am reading way more audiobooks, but I guess not. It's actually split pretty much down the middle, as you can see. So about 50% physical, 49 technically, 44% audiobooks, and then tiny little slivers here. So I had a couple like ebooks / PDFs. It's not something I read a lot, but that's in there. And then the two times I read a book in both physical and audiobook form. I think I did that with Where the Crawdads Sing, When the Crawdads Sing, you know what I mean, and Monsters of the 21st Century. I'm saying that wrong. You know what I mean? If you watch this video, flip back. But that's something I've really enjoyed doing. I think it works best if it's something like a short story collection where you can read one short story in one format, one in another format, because I'm trying to do it with Moll Flanders right now. Spoiler, I'm reading Moll Flanders right now, and that book has no breaks and no chapters or anything, which is just wild. So it's kind of impossible to flip back and forth. So I think I'm now officially just reading that as an audiobook. Genre. This is always really interesting. So I break up my fiction into a few things, my nonfiction into a few things. So I end up with a lot of different categories, but they can kind of be grouped together. So 31% fiction, which is just novels and novellas, like a typical novel. And then I like to track how much autofiction I read, which is really more like a genre. oh wait, we're talking about genre, but subgenre. And so that's 9%. And these numbers here are just the number of actual books. So 8 autofiction books equates to 9%. And then short story collections makes up 5%. So this is all fiction. So it's a good chunk of fiction. I kind of wish I'd done what I did here, which is group them together. And then I'm always a little perplexed as to how to break up nonfiction, because I broke it up into essays and memoirs and then into educational. But often the books I like to read, for example, Olivia Lang or Robin Wall Kimmerer, they write in a way which integrates aspects of memoir into educational writing. So I just do my best. I count those as essays. And then nonfiction educational, I only listed books like The Beaver Book and my plant guides and things like that. That's what I counted as educational. So that the essays and memoirs, 9%, and then the educational makes up 15%. And that would not normally be so high, but it's because I was out at the camp a lot this year, so I ended up reading a lot. Just about facts. Poetry, 18% of my reading. That's really not very much as for someone who writes poetry. I think I would like to see that higher this year, though I haven't made a specific goal. But there's definitely poetry on my sort of immediate TBR that I feel pretty motivated to get through. And I read a few graphic novels. I read 5 graphic novels, 1 letter collection, which is that 84 Charing Cross Road right at the end, a little bit of children's literature, and a bit of art and photography, so just a few small ones there. But we're mostly looking at fiction, nonfiction, poetry is what I read. And then we have the decade published. So I specifically wanted to track this because of the Reading Through History challenge. So it's not normally something that I would track. And I mean, it's pretty broadly obvious that I mainly read things published after 2000. And I actually, in retrospect, regret, I wish I had actually broken this up into decades as well. I did it like this because that's how my challenge worked, but I wish I had broken it up into the noughts, the 10s, and the 20s. But oh well. So we've already looked at the Reading Through History challenge, so that's pretty much what we already saw there. The source, this is interesting, and this informed a goal for my upcoming year as well. So only 22% of the books that I read were books I already owned. 16% were books that I bought this year. And then 57% of the books that I read, by far the biggest percent, were from the library/Libby, which is the audiobook app that I use. And then some I borrowed, some were open access that I got online. So while this is extremely rad that I am patroning my library, I would really like to be reading more of the books that I already own. So what I'm doing, a little spoiler for this year, I won't tell you the exact goal that I set because I think I would like to go through my goals in another video. If people want, let me know if you want to know what my new goals are. But any books that I'm reading as audiobook, I'm trying to read books that are on my physical TBR shelf. For example, I have Split Tooth by Tanya Chagak. On for years has been on my shelf, and so I was looking through the Libby app and I saw that it's also on Libby as an audiobook, and it's read by her, so I'm definitely going to save that one to read as an audiobook. So trying to get through my already owned books rather than just, I mean, sometimes I end up reading kind of random audiobooks because I'm just looking for an audiobook to read, so I think this is a better way to go about it. And then this is always really interesting. So my rating, what did I rate books? So as I said, I just have one star. It's really not typical for me. Just a few in the 2 and 2.5 star range, 9% together. 15% 3-star books, 9% 3.5-star books, 20% 4-star books, 13% 4.5, and 10% 5-star books. I mean, 8 5-star books. I'm pretty happy with that. That's pretty sick. And I would actually love to have a list of what those are. See, I'm learning more for how I want to do my end of year wrap up next year. So you have to wait a year to see that. But I made a little bracket here that says good books. So this is 4, 4.5, and 5-star books. If I'm reading something that's between 4 and 5 stars, I'm happy. So let's see, that's 30, 43%. So 43% of the books that I read, I would consider to be good books that I enjoyed. So that's pretty sweet. It's always a gamble every time you pick up a book. And to have that many be a book that I like solidly enjoyed or loved or is a new favorite, that's pretty sweet. I could even bump it up even higher if I wanted to say like 3 and above, though 3 is kind of meh. So these are books that I solidly enjoyed and would almost certainly recommend to anyone. So I'm pretty dang happy with that. So that's the end of that. This is my little pocket where I keep little collage scraps. Oh my god, I almost forgot. Wow, I'm glad we did that. So, got all these blank pages, which kind of bothers me, but what are you gonna do? So, starting from the back, okay. This is something that I do where I use this as almost like a brain dump, and I go from the back towards the front, and this is just a wish list. So like I said, because I'm trying not to buy too many books, this allows me to just write down a book that I think is interesting, and then I also write down why I think it's interesting, because like if I just read Shy by Max Porter, I wouldn't remember what that was, but I was like, oh yeah, I heard about it somewhere, that it's about like toxic masculinity, it's a short book, so it could be good to teach, that kind of thing. And I do some little stars besides ones that I especially want to read. Oh, see, No Time to Spare, Essays by Ursula Le Guin. This women's work, The First 20,000 Years, is a book I'm currently reading as an audiobook, which my wonderful husband gave to me. So that was lovely. Yeah, these all look super interesting, and I don't think I actually went through these and looked at what I would still be interested in. So a lot of these, I look at them again and I'm like, I don't know, I'm fine not having read that. Like The Outsiders, yeah, I guess I could read that, but I don't really want to. But some of these I'm looking at them. The True Deceiver I think about all the time. I need to read this book. So yeah, there are some I think I will perhaps add to that list that's on my phone to look out for when I'm in a secondhand bookstore, or put on a little reading list to borrow from the library as well. I'm really trying to stick with what I did this past year, which is only end up buying books that I already know that I love. And I did a little reward shopping haul a couple months ago, or last month, in which I went and bought a bunch of books that were 4 and 5 stars from this year that I didn't own. I got from the library. So that was really fun. Buying a bunch of books without adding to my TBR pile was very satisfying. This, I was trying out some mild liners, though I think I'm going to stick to my Tombows, which I very deeply love. I go to a journaling club occasionally, and someone brought their mild liners, and you know what? They're honestly not that mild. Look how neon that is. So I'm happy with my Tombows. Oh, look, I wrote this down twice. That's so funny. You can tell I really wanted to read it. Anyway, so that is my reading journal for the past year. So I am quite happy with all of that. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I guess subscribe and like and stuff. If there is interest, like I said, I do want to make some more videos. I want to show you some of the things that, all the materials that I actually use, because I'm sure people who are interested in journaling would be interested in that. And I'd also love to take you on a little tour of my reading journal for 2025. I'm almost 3 months into it. At the end of February, I'll be 3 months into it, and that could be a good time to show you guys where I'm at. So, thank you so much.